Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of Sagionic 1027. We're so glad you decided to join us today. And with us, I have another one of those guests. Today, my special guest is, to say this woman is talented is an understatement. Today my guest is Angela Breidenbach. And I love how it's like through this person to this person to this person. I keep being introduced to these people, and my friends behind the scenes are like, "Oh my gosh, Shawn, you got to interview this person. Oh, Shawn, you need to interview this person. You need to interview this person." And I'm gonna have to live a long time.
I think that's the fun part of life, is how many people.
Yes, it is. So,
Okay,
Angela, thank you so much for coming to our program today. Today's program is
thank
all
you.
about you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I think
Yes.
this kind of a thing is what I'd love to do in heaven. Is one of the reasons I love genealogy is getting to know who my ancestors were. But I also think that when I'm in heaven, it's going to be eternity being able to interview people about their lives, right?
That is so good, Angela, because you know what? I remember years ago, one of my clients, her name was Eleanor Hayden, and she used to say this phrase. She used to say, "I should say so," but I remember her daughters valued my space in their mom's life, so they called me when she was near the end, and I remember sitting with her, and I said, "Eleanor, just think, real soon you're going to be able to sit with David. You're going to be able to sit with Daniel and say, 'Daniel, tell me about the first-hand account of you being lowered down into the lion's den.'" So I love that you would share that. So can you tell us, okay, so tell people your official title, because I know you're a genius in genealogy, but tell people how you were drawn to that.
You know, my family told a lot of stories, and my grandfather was born in 1883. I wasn't born till 1964. And I would sit at his knee and he would tell me stories of his family. And I was always captured by the idea of, I wished I could have known those people. And then my dad, that was my mother's father. And then my dad was also very much into genealogy. And I inherited his genealogy documentation and books and things like that. So when he passed in 2014, I decided that the best thing I could do, that I have always wanted to do, was to go ahead and get my genealogy education. And then when I graduated, I ended up taking over the school that I graduated from. So,
Oh gosh, and I'm of the mindset to believe that because there's no sorrow in heaven, there's no more tears in heaven. Okay, I personally believe that people who are in heaven, this is my own belief system, people who are in heaven can look down on earth and see, depending on what space of frame of mind I'm in, I can say the creator of the universe working in and through mankind, the Lord God Almighty working in and through mankind, right? The Lord Jesus working in, the Holy Spirit moving. I think they see things. They get to see the beauty, because it says the Lord is always at work in you to will you according to his purposes, right? And just everybody on earth, whether they acknowledge or believe it, they were created in the image of the creator.
I agree.
Right. And so I think this is just fascinating. But so you had a desire before there was 23andMe. Like I should be careful about saying different names. Okay.
It's okay. A lot of people ask about these different companies and,
Okay.
well, who should I do my DNA test through? And should I do it? And what does it mean if I do it? And so, the names are well known.
Okay.
And
Okay.
they all really appreciate getting the extra boost. No worries.
Okay. But before all of that, you had that desire. So can you share with us, because you didn't take over the school just because you had a good work ethic. Okay, so can you share with us one of those first examples of where you saw the difference it made in another person's life to discover certain things about their past and their family?
Yeah, I've actually seen that quite a bit, because the people that are they're searching. Let's put it that way. A lot of people are searching. They want a sense of belonging, or they want answers.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that is most poignant right now is that there's a lot of divisiveness in the country, in the world. And once you find out how interconnected you are, it's very hard to immediately divide one another. So to me, genealogy is, first of all, it's in the Bible. It's very biblical. And I think it's crucial that we realize how interconnected we are. I've seen people find out that they were as blonde as you are and found out that they descended from slaves. I've seen other people find out that their families were people that, well, in our family, I'm working on proving it right now, that we found out that the Moses Bigelow definitely was an ancestor, and that name was very significant in the Underground Railroad. And when you start to realize where you come from, and that those different things have been passed down through generations, you start to not just find your sense of belonging, but there is a wondrous opportunity where you can see not just the cautionary tales of those that have gone awry, or you can also see the heroic tales, and you can see who you'd much rather be like, which is why we heard the stories in the Bible of those that not only were great heroes, but that those great heroes had foibles, had problems.
That's
and
right.
That there's not one single hero in the Bible except Jesus that didn't commit some sort of major sin. And so have our ancestors. But they can be both those cautionary and those heroic tales. And as you speak to people and they find out maybe where they came from, they start to have compassion on their parents or their grandparents, because they understand some of the things they've gone through, especially when you teach them through genealogy, how to connect social history and political history and religious history and the history of their own family and how those things happen together. So yeah, in my own family, finding out some of the stories made a huge difference on how I viewed the people that went before. Where I might have been much more judgmental in the past, I feel much more gracious toward them now, knowing what they experienced, what their troubles were in their travels.
Yeah. So what is something that you discovered about yourself that, you're like, oh, I'm just like, and there was somebody in your family line that not only were you like them personality wise, or maybe there was you were drawn towards a particular, let's say, art, like writing. Right? Okay, yeah. because okay, when you were talking about, heroes or the other, right? Behind me is Rahab.
Oh, I love that.
That's Rahab. And so could you tell our viewers the significance, not that the Lord God Almighty would have chosen her at the time occupation, but even in the midst of her interesting positions in life, what came from her lineage?
Oh my gosh, Jesus came from her lineage.
Yeah, but not everybody knows that.
Right. And in addition to that, what's fascinating is that Rahab ended up going into the camp and marrying, and her son was the person that, okay, so Ruth and Naomi, their story is the generation right after Rahab, right?
Oh,
so you start to realize that we hear the verse a lot, wherever you go, I will go. And that is something that's used a lot in marriage, but it was really Ruth and Naomi. And when you start to think about that they came together, and that son that Ruth eventually married came out of Rahab's, lineage, it's like, holy cow, how but if you go back, you can sit at the kitchen table. For instance, in our family, we had a situation. We have 6 kids. We're a combined family. They've all grown and have their kids, and we have grandkids now. But we were sitting at the kitchen table, and the kids were asking one day, well, they were in trouble for having done something they shouldn't. And they say, well, what, haven't you ever done that? And they would look at my husband and he'd go, no. Well, they're all looking at him and I'd go, yeah. And they'd go, what? You know,
Uh-huh.
because we see I don't want to say perfect because that's not what I mean, but we see the polished version of a person as they've grown older, but we don't necessarily see the things that they've done in the past. And I think when we go through the stories of genealogy, I have a great uncle who really tripped up. He really screwed up bad. But none of the family in today's generation knew that. And they actually asked me, can you find him? Because we've lost track of him, but we know where he is because he ended up living in their household as an older man and was very kind and courteous and pious, you know, but they couldn't figure out why they didn't have any other history and why he never told them the history about this entire missing section of his life. And they're like, this makes no sense to us. I found it, the whole story in less than 2 hours.
No way!
Yeah. And it was something that they couldn't find. And there was a couple of things that came into play. Some of it was my education as a genealogist and a researcher. And part of it was that he was a wonderful man by the time he passed, but he made some serious mistakes in his youth. And he ended up going to penitentiary for it. And this was in 1902. So it was easy enough to find if you knew what to look for and where to look. And at the time, I happened to have, and I still do, an account with newspapers.com, which is a place that is, you know, really nice for searching. And that helps you to look stuff up. Well, what you have to remember is that they didn't use full names and that it's pretty easy to flip-flop the initials. So back in the earlier 1900s, they would use just the initials and the last name. And the first newspaper that told the story transposed the first and middle initial. And the last name was so common that they thought that they had the wrong person, so they bypassed it all the time. I was able to track it back and find out that not only had my great uncle done a dastardly deed, and he was definitely a cautionary tale, but that the newspapers and people of the time were so vicious about it that they posted all of this national scandal, and I mean national scandal. It was in every newspaper you could possibly find, and he had I don't want to say too much that would be inappropriate, but let's say he had stolen some money from his boss in order to set up his boss's daughter in a second house. But he was already married with a child. And the newspapers across the country said he went on the lam. And he did. And he was chased all over by a detective through the train system and everything. And he eventually found him. Now, this man knew better. And you could say he knew better. He was described in the newspapers as exceedingly handsome. And he was exceedingly handsome. He was my grandfather's brother there was a set of twins. And one twin went on the right road, the other twin went on the wrong road. And this man was a nice man, generally. And as you hear in some of these criminal TV shows, you know, well, we'd have never suspected. Yeah. But the whole village at this point knew, and then the whole nation knew. And this goes back to, you know, there's nothing is a secret. Nothing will remain secret.
That's right. That's Hebrews 4.
Yep. And he got found out. And so when the detective found him, he found him at his in another state at his wife's father's house because he was begging his wife to come back to him so she wouldn't testify against him. But when he knew he was caught, he was caught. The detective said he never even needed to cuff him. He took him back to the railroad hotel. They stayed overnight. They got on the train. They went back, and he stood trial. And then he went to prison. Well, all of this story was posted literally right next to my great-grandfather's business. Every time there was a story out, They post it right next to my
Oh,
great-grandfather's ad for his
gosh.
business. That's what I talk about viciousness, right? So my great-grandfather had nothing to do with what had happened, but they destroyed his business by posting his son's problems right next to it in the newspaper. And this is how I started to discover and untangle the problem. From there, I never knew, and I'd asked my grandfather, but I never heard, why did you move from one state, and they moved in covered wagons across to another? Why did this happen? What was going on? And he would never really give me a straight answer. So it turns out that this is why. Because not only had his brother destroyed his father's business, he had destroyed everybody in the family's businesses with his choices. And the whole family picked up and moved from Iowa to Minnesota. Some split off into North Dakota. And then my great aunt divorced my great uncle, and he served his time. And then he went on and he ended up over on the coast where he got into another line of work. And eventually he remarried, and he ended up having a life where he made the right choices. And to me, not only did it start out as a cautionary tale, but it ended up a tale of grace. Because he was able to change his life, and he didn't make that mistake over and over and over again. And in the end, his children, it was interesting because his grandchildren and great-grandchildren and I are very good friends. And they asked me to wait to tell the story until his daughter had passed, because she knew once I found the information, I passed it on to the family because they had requested it. And in genealogy, you don't want to harm anyone. And so you ask them, I have found something that could be upsetting, and this is part of the ethics in genealogy. Would you like me to tell you, or would you like me to keep it to myself, or maybe even destroy it? They chose for me to tell them. And so they asked, we are glad you found out. We are glad to know. But could you not say it publicly or write the story until after his daughter passes? And she's just passed this last summer. So based on that agreement, I can share. I try to do so with grace, because I see that the end of his life was full of grace, and that he learned from what he had done. And I think that David learned from what he did.
That's right.
Rahab learned from what she did. And I think as you go down through the stories, through the generations, you're going to see that some people learn and some people don't. I love that my great uncle learned, and that grace that he was given after his mistake produced some pretty wonderful people that I get to know today. So that's a personal story that's involved.
That's right. That's really beautiful, Angela, because if and even in thinking and listening to you, at what point in your life were you drawn to what was your first book out the gates? Was it the historical fiction? What was your first book, and did genealogy play a role in your life then, or did the genealogy come later?
I think it's always been intertwined. I just never had the opportunity to do it as a career until later. Okay. The first book that I ever the first book I ever had published was the most stolen book from the airline I worked for ever. It was the most stolen product. Yeah. I think that's really cool, right?
Yeah, we can put it up there with the Gideon Bibles inside of the hotels, right?
Right. It was, so I worked for an airline it was Ameriquest Airlines, and I started off as a cross-utilized agent, where you would do in-flight, you would do gates, you would do whatever, and then I became a supervisor. And during that time, the one thing I noticed was how lost everyone was, and the internet didn't really exist at that time yet. So I wrote a book, and I got some volunteers that spoke other languages, and then I compiled theirs. And it was a travel book that would supposedly stay at the gate, and we could assist people getting just like what on your phone does now, where you can do the translation. Yeah. So one side of the page would be English, the other side of the page would be Chinese or Japanese or Korean or Spanish, And The problem was that they printed a whole bunch of copies, and then it kept getting stolen. So then they started putting the metal rings and hooks, and they would chain it to the gate, and they were still getting stolen.
Oh God!
And finally, like a year or two in, I think it was probably 2 years in or something like that, they finally quit producing it because they couldn't produce it fast enough. And I'm thinking, these people were really short-sighted. Why in the world would you not sell those things instead of put them at a gate and let them get stolen?
Yeah.
Why in the world would you not market it? And I don't know. So that was my first book. And then my second book was years later, and it was this one, Gems of Wisdom. And it came out 2000, and I have to look. That's sad. Something like 2010.
Okay.
So this is its, I think, third iteration. Third or fourth, third iteration.
Okay.
Yeah. So this one is definitely more of a devotional, and through it, I interviewed other women who'd gone through difficulty as well as I had, and I also told the story of what I experienced being the daughter of paranoid schizophrenic as part of my story, and then when she passed, the things I learned from other people about her, which broke my heart but also thrilled my heart, because I had been such an angry daughter, such an angry little girl for all the things that were constantly happening. And it was during her memorial that we did for her that people stood up and asked, could we tell you something? And I said, well, sure. And what really blew my mind was the words they used were straight out of the Bible, but they didn't intend for them to be. What happened was sorry, let me set this down. When she was in a nursing home, while she could still walk, the person who stood up said, my family member, I don't remember, it was their mother or father, this is back in 2007 now, was thirsty, and your mother brought a cup of water for them to drink. And somebody else stood and said, yeah, you know where I'm going with this, right? And someone else stood up and said, I was cold and she brought me a blanket. And then someone else said, my parent was hurting and she went and got the nurse to bring them medication. So she did all the things that the Bible verse says. When you have given a cup of water, when you have clothed someone, when you have fed someone, you've done these things to me. And it broke my heart into just smithereens, because all that anger was gone when I recognized. I was so mad at God because I felt like her whole life was spent trapped in her mind, and I was so angry. And what stunned me was recognizing that he had beauty for every life, whether or not I, in my small-mindedness, could see it. And that opened my mind and my heart to that his purposes and his ways are much, much bigger and greater than my ways. And his understanding is much broader than my understanding. And to me, genealogy is really all about that. It opens up your understanding for the individual and maybe the experiences they had that might have made them the way that they were. And when we can look back, 2020 is always phenomenal, but it's not an easy road for a lot of those who've gone before us. And we put on rosy-colored glasses in this modern time and judge them based on our current time. How foolish are we? I had one book I wrote about my grandparents' love story, right? I found out from a family friend who had rented from them back in the earlier 1900s. They got married in 1930, and she told me that they got married because they were forced to get married because of town gossip. I was like, what? And then she told me the story as it unfolded. And I had, they were married 54 years. Who wouldn't think that it was a love story, right? And as it turned out, they did love one another. But it was really difficult for them because he had been married to her cousin. And they had been married 15 years, no children. And he was 46 or 47. He was 47 when he married my grandmother, because she had been called home from being a nurse. And the people of the town were pointing their fingers at her, who had been a virgin and unmarried woman, as if she was taking advantage of him, the young widower. And he was 21 years her senior and had been married, before. So the families decided they needed to get married. And so I wrote their story. I changed it a little bit. I fictionalized it because, of course, I couldn't be there to know every word they said.
Yeah.
And I moved it back in time to 1899 so that it would allow me, eventually I'm writing their biographies, and I want to write the full story. That one was done for Barbara as a novella, and so I kept some of the rights to myself by fictionalizing a little bit about it. But the story, the gist of it, is very, very true. And so I think watching what they went through, and then having I had somebody read that story and say to me, "Oh, that's not true. Nobody would force anybody, especially a widower, only a widowed for a year. They would never force them to get married." And it's like, that's putting on your rosy glasses of today.
That's right.
People got married out of necessity for most of the eons that we've existed. And we are blessed to be in a place today where we have more choices than people had in the past. And people did get married and grow to love one another. But even as 1910 here in Montana, I wrote the story about the largest fire in U.S. history up to 1910, and it burned over 3 million acres. And the men and women that worked in that area, if a man died in the mines or on the railroad, literally that woman could be married that same day because she was carried off immediately, because there were so few women for the men of the area. And that was right here on the Montana-Idaho border, right? And so if you go and you ride the Trail of the Hiawatha, the book that I wrote here, The Flame of the Rockies, that one was set during that time based on that true history. It's well documented. And so one of the things I would say to people is get to know the time and the place and the laws and the morals, society of that time, before you place the judgments of today on those people of the past.
I want to hone in on a couple of things, and that is that the beauty of I want to say the beauty of choice, okay? Because you shared about your biological mom, but you are clearly of your right mind, right? So there had to have been a time, and when you shared about, at her passing, the things that were shared were literally straight out of the Bible, okay? So my mom was, she had bipolar before there was that label. Okay.
That's what they called paranoid schizophrenic back then.
Yeah. And so but at my mom's service, which was in 2011, okay, there was a person who, we didn't even announce my mom's service. Okay. And there was 500 people there.
Holy cow.
We didn't even announce, meaning back then there was word of mouth, right? But not like now, like we can send it out in a greater way now, right? But had it been posted in a newspaper article, if 500 people showed up and it wasn't even posted in a newspaper, can you imagine where we would have had? Anyways, all that to say, I want to share. Okay, I need a visual to use. I got to grab a visual here. Okay, let's pretend like this is a canning jar. Okay. So there was, and I don't think it would just be disrespectful to share this verbiage as I'm going to choose to share it. Okay. And because the person knows that I wouldn't speak disrespectfully against him, but there was a flaming homosexual man who was a drag queen, a glorious, I don't want to use that word glorious, was a very flamboyant drag queen, okay? And he stood up to share about my mom. And he said, your mom was such an amazing person that she would come to my shows and she would whistle and hoot and holler and say how amazing I was. And she would bring her jar full of coins. And she would say, I brought every last penny in the world that I own. And everybody just started cracking up because everything my mom did was every last penny in the world, right? And people just started hysterically laughing. But person after person after person stood up and said how my mom, our mom, because we were raised in a family of 6, poured love over others. So in her brokenness, and as she was stuck, she had engaged in some decisions in life that were quite destructive, and she was never freed from that destructiveness of what she had engaged in, and yet she proceeded to reach out to broken people, right? And but I think that there's a beauty in what you share. We can think of genealogy, right? But then let's think of the bigger genealogy purpose, picture, right? You came from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right?
Right.
And how we can take on the DNA, we can take on the image, we can bear the image of the Creator who says, God has not given you a spirit of confusion, but of peace and of love and a sound mind. So I don't know about your world, but in my world, when I began to read what the Creator of the universe, the God of the Bible, had to say, I'm like, oh, I'm partnering with that, and I'm partnering with that. Oh, yep, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. I didn't have to adopt my ancestry, right? So, and I'm sure you've seen this in your work in other people's lives as well.
Yeah, I've seen it a lot, and I hear the stories a lot. I keep those stories to myself unless I've been given permission to share them.
That's right.
But I think that every single one of us is broken. None of us is perfect. And sometimes one of the funniest things people will do is point fingers at someone and say, oh, she thinks she's perfect, or he thinks he's perfect. And the reality is that person knows they're not. Yeah. And it's, you can't really take somebody down for being perfect because they already know they're not. It's like, so I think that's something that not just genealogy, but humankind, as we start to learn these stories, it helps us to understand that we're all just human. We all make mistakes. We all wish we could do something better, or wish we hadn't forgotten, or wish that word hadn't escaped our lips, And I think that is one thing that we learn as we go through life. But I think too that when someone can become what they hope to be, for me being an educator, I had no idea I would do this as my, last career, if you will. Yeah, and I still love writing. So I'm writing curriculum, I'm editing curriculum, I'm writing books, I love writing screenplays, I love doing all of these things. But you asked me earlier, who am I like? And I would say probably my grandpa, because he wrote poems, he wrote his story, his life story. He did all of these different things. He loved to sing. I love to sing, I would say that those things were passed down generationally. And I would say that sometimes people feel that loss because they don't know what was passed down generation to them. But if you go back even into the Old Testament, there's when God handed out the jobs, he very specifically gave them to different tribes. There's people who were in particular tribe that became artisans, right? There's the people that were the Levites, where they were the priests and the singers, and they did all of that. There were people who were woodworkers, and each tribe had their own thing. And it's interesting to me I would love to be able to go all the way back up the genealogy and find out, I have an inkling of what tribe I'm descended from. Let's just put it that way. I have an inkling. And I have an inkling the tribe my husband's family was descended from, because they're much more mechanically minded, whereas I'm much more creative minded, And I think if we start thinking of ourselves as connected through the talents we have, it helps us feel a sense of belonging to people that are like us as well, without creating that division of, what color's your hair, your skin, your eyes, how tall are you, what do you look like on the outside, is not necessarily as important as who you are on the inside and what it is you have to give to the world through the talents that God created inside of you. And I think genealogy does that for us. I think it helps us connect that way when we get to know the person that went before. And if you look at the particular families of origin and you go back, one side of my family seems to have had something happen that was very traumatic in there. I want to go find out what that's about, because of the behaviors that you see in that side now. And the other side seemed to be more creative and more giving into the world. And I want to know, well, why did they do that? And then, you have a choice. Do you want to be someone that is giving and kind and courteous and good toward others, or do you want to be someone that is contentious and always creating a struggle around you? And I think that you don't have to always look at this person that did such and so and hold that grudge. You can look at this person experienced some real hardship, and I want to understand them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a better way for me of being than it is to keep holding that chip on your shoulder.
That's right. Yeah. And don't you think also, Angela, that even if we think of, to me, one of the easiest verses is Jesus came to serve and not be served, right?
Yeah.
So if we're trying to fill self, because I don't think we could ever attain to me, myself, and I more. I don't think there's no level that you can attain that you're satisfied in just focusing on yourself. Whereas the joy that comes in your walk of life, right, or in my walk of life, wanting to pull out the gems. Mm-hmm. You got your gemstone book, right? Wanting to pull out the gems. I love to go into environments and pull out the good in someone, to see the beauty. I can find beauty in anybody. I don't care where you are. Mm-hmm. I can find a beauty in anybody, right? But for you specifically speaking, like with genealogy, like if I was to see a picture of my great-great-grandmother and her body is the same shape as mine, I'm like, no wonder I've weighed the same weight for 20 years, right? No matter what I've tried to do, I've weighed the same weight for 20 years, right? And or to tell people, this is quite transparent here, to tell people up here, I'm the smallest in my family, and people are like, are you kidding me? You're the smallest there, and we won't get into numbers on screen, right? But that's why I purposely have my screen right here.
I so understand. I so understand. I'm right with you.
Right? But in seeing this picture of my great-great-grandmother, oh my gosh, her body, that's why I look just like this, right? Yeah. And I just think there's so much comfort in it. And so not only underneath this interview with you, if somebody was to click on the more, you'll be able to find contact information in all the different ways you can contact Angela, but also it's like, oh my gosh, that's why this makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Even how I don't know if you had a chance to watch a little video of how Sister Shawn thinks over here, right? But if I look back and I think, oh gosh, if somebody would have tried to, if I was an extrovert then, as I am now, they would have put me in a special class, because they would say my brain's all over the place, and it's not. It's not. I just learned that your brain can do so much all at once. And so perhaps in my mom's world, or perhaps in your mom's world, our mom's brains were so active that there wasn't the activity around them that could hone in on the brilliance of the minds that they truly had.
It's a very common trait that, so my mom's actual diagnosis was paranoid schizophrenic, manic depressive with delusions of grandeur. And it was very difficult being in that household, but she was very smart, but she was very childlike as well.
Yeah.
And it was difficult for her, but it's very common for people with paranoid schizophrenia to be a very brilliant person as well. And I find that interesting, that the studies that, you can go look up or whatever.
Yeah.
I found that very interesting. But I also think that it takes a lot to take a step back and look at that person through God's eyes.
That's right.
Instead of through the child that went through the difficulties, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to remember to do. And I know one thing that really helped me prior to her death, I was very angry at God, like I had mentioned, because I wasn't sure if she's going to go to heaven. I didn't know what was going to happen to her. And I shook my fist at God and said, "You've got to at least give me this." And he actually did. And at the same time, it was a balm for my soul, BALM, as well as answering my prayer, which was, let me know she's going to be in heaven, because you did this to her. You did this, God. You did this to her in her life. How could you be so cruel as to not give her a chance to go to heaven, right? That was my thought process. And while she was in the hospice room, whole big old long story on that, but while she was in process of giving up her spirit to the Lord, she lifted up, and I guess this is something common I've learned from hospice nurses, but whether they say something or not, you don't know. But she lifted up her arms to the corner of the room, and she sat up, and she said, "I love you, Jesus."
Oh,
and then she fell back. Yeah. And it wasn't long after that she passed. But I was both in shock, deep sadness, and elation at the same time, because I felt like he had given me that. God had given me that. And I, angry little girl that I was so mad at him. And he still, gave me that gift. And that's when I really thought, okay, I need to rethink how my impression of her.
That's right.
I need to rethink as an adult what I believed about her, and let go of those grudges that I had against her,
Mm-hmm.
And it made a huge difference, that those few little words that God let me overhear.
That's right. Well, because you were faced with a choice, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You could either continue to recite the lies from the past, or you could partner with the new revelatory insights into the future, right? If we look at creation doesn't go backwards, right? There's no confusion in creation, right?
Right.
You don't have to teach a cat to chase a squirrel. You're not going to see a squirrel chasing a cat, right? You're not going to see a squirrel chasing a dog. They may do the stick up their tail and wave their tail to try to shoo off the cat or the dog, right? But creation doesn't go backwards. Creation always goes forward, right? And so it makes sense that we as created human beings, who all of creation was made first so we can enjoy it. Well, if we just look at creation and mimic creation and continue to move forward, boy, it sure does make life a lot more beautiful. It really does. And I really value you saying that through genealogy, understanding, you can tell you're a writer. Sister Shawn over here is plain Jane. I'm just simpleton woman, right?
You're very smart.
But just it's just so beautiful to see. We are created for greatness. We truly are. We truly are created for greatness. So I would like you to do something, okay? I'm going to call it an activation. Okay. And you get to decide, as an author, you get to decide as a woman who has studied much genealogy and has been privy to see into different people's lives, the good, the bad, the successful, the, oh gosh, heartache stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would like you to, per se, give the audience an invitation on, like if you were to put, I don't want to give any examples. I just want you to give the audience an invitation for this was like this has been like this, but there could be something else over here, that
Okay.
you could do, whatever that looks like to you.
Well, I think for me, it has a lot to do with genealogy. It has a lot to do with family, a sense of family. And I think if your past has felt broken, if your past has felt like you didn't belong, that you might want to explore the opportunity to find out why. That's what genealogy does for you. It gives you the opportunity to find out why. Why did these people do this and those people do that? And some people have found out that they were either stolen or taken and they never felt like they belonged, or that they were ignored and they couldn't figure out why they didn't belong. And you can go through and find out the social and religious, political, all of those things that went into the person before you, and then kind of go up that lineage. And at some point, someone in that genealogy is going to connect to you, and you're going to feel that sense of belonging. But knowing who you are starts with, where did you come from? And some people don't know who they are. So if you don't know who you are, or you don't have a sense of belonging, you don't have to have a faith. You don't have to have a political belief. You don't have to have a country of origin. All you have to have is a desire to find out more about why you are who you are, where you come from, and then you join the story of the journey of those people. And as you go back and learn more and more and more, you start to find out how you became who you are. You start to find out some of the talents, the abilities, the struggles that people have overcome. And you start to find out a little bit about who you really are. And you become that person that you want to be, because you no longer are tied to the shattered parts or the broken parts or the lonely parts. Now you're able to understand maybe how the people before you became who they were, and you can understand them as an adult. And you don't have to be caught in that childhood hurt anymore. You can look at them through the picture of the eyes of understanding, and it will release you into a beautiful new future from that which feels shackled to loneliness.
Brilliantly spoken. Brilliantly spoken. Angela, you'll enjoy this. No, I wasn't consulting the dead or anything like that for our viewers, but there was a day I was in my office, and it was like the Lord coming to me, wanting to have a conversation with me. And then I heard this phrase, okay? It was as though I could see into heaven, and I saw my biological father, not the father who raised me, but my biological father and my mom. And this is what I heard. Shawn, it was my dad's voice, my biological father's voice. He said, Shawn, we're sorry that when we were on earth, we could not provide for you in a manner in which you desired. However, when we got to heaven, we saw like the Lord sees, and we knew that your gift of faith had to begin at a very early age. And I was like, wow, Lord, wow. I was so blessed. And you know what? Now that I say this out loud, it had to have been my biological father's voice, because when I was 11, my parents had separated and I had a new dad who raised me. But I remember my mom telling me I wanted a unicycle, and she told me to contact my biological father, who had nothing to do with us financially or relationally, anything like that, right? And I remember how crushed my heart was when he said, well, I can't get you a unicycle, but I can tell you how you can earn one. I was 11. But I was an entrepreneur then, and I still am today, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important in knowing, now mine happened to be a supernatural experience, what I'll call a supernatural. But is that not what so many things are? Supernatural, to be able to look into the past in genealogy, to be able to find the stories, the relatabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is. Life is supernatural, right?
Let's call it an epiphany.
Okay, okay. I like that.
Every now and again, you learn something about yourself or someone that went before you, and it opens your eyes to recognize something different than what you understood before.
That's
And
right.
I would say it gives you sometimes an epiphany, and that epiphany or that recognition of a different reality gives you the opportunity to become who you should be.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Um, so not one, not two. Hold on a sec. I'm moving my website here. I'm moving Angela's website here. Let's see, 36912. She loves her cat. I love that the cat types. Do you still have the cat?
I do. I made sure he had his kibbles so he wouldn't come in and talk back. Yes.
I had to lure my dog in so I could put him in his kennel, because otherwise his head will pop up right here on set.
Yeah, Muse will jump up on and he'll try to pull over the laptop, when I'm
Yeah.
working, or he'll come and he'll sit here and he'll start grabbing my arm, pulling me over. So I made sure he got his kibbles so he go take a nap.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
good. But I just want to encourage people that if you've never explored the possibility of wanting to go down the path of genealogy, do it. Angela has just given us such a broad spectrum on an understanding in, now I see. Oh gosh, oh, that's just beautiful. And I'm not poo-pooing any of those that just shows your blood type and the origin where you're from, but that is just a small, minute thing compared to finding out about the people, because it really comes down to the people. And
Hmm.
so I would encourage you, reach out to Angela. I know Angela's on my, what do I want to do in 2024? I would like to professionally work with Angela. Uh, just what a delight it was to have you today. I really thank you for your time. I thank you for your work. I thank you for I'm going to call it your work ethic is one of excellency, because you're not going to kind of sort of want to figure something out for someone, but you want to know the facts and the truth, because ultimately it's going to bring deliverance. It even makes me think of the verse, all those things written aforetime were written as an example, so that you, through faith, may believe, right?
Mm.
And to me, you've depicted a faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Okay, to me, you've demonstrated a version of what I'm going to call faith, okay? Because when you can see what was, you can partner with somebody who did something that you knew could be developed in you, that you knew could bless and benefit the future.
Yeah.
Or when you look back, you can deconstruct something that was done in a destructive way. So then you can break that off of your life, remodel, revamp the human body to then move forward into the future. So
Hmm.
either way, you could be the benefactor to benefit the future. And it goes back to that verse, all these things written aforetime were written as an example, so that you, through faith, could believe to make a difference in life.
That's what I hope. I hope
Yeah,
that as people come, they can not we it's like the same thing as the Lord. He didn't do the fishing for him, but he taught you how to fish,
that's
right?
right.
And when you come into genealogicalstudies.com to take the classes, we're not only helping you discover your own family and your own questions, which is usually the reason people come into genealogy, is they have questions that are unanswered, mysteries that they need to solve. But a lot of people now come for a new opportunity. They come for the chance at a future that they couldn't get in the jobs they were doing before. They come for the opportunity to help others. It's amazing to me to watch these people go through, gain their credentials, and go out into the world and it's this amazing ripple effect where they're changing lives. They're helping people discover adoptive families. They're helping people find organ donors. They're helping people repatriate fallen soldiers. They're helping discover were they a stolen child. They're helping to just solve the problems that nag at the heart. And that's amazingly what genealogy can do. You can do DNA, but you have to substantiate it with the records and the stories. You cannot say, I mean, people don't realize DNA sheds, right?
Yeah.
And so they want to immediately say, oh, that's the criminal or that's the so-and-so. But what they don't realize that if you hug somebody, you're going to carry the DNA of that person on you for quite a while. And sometimes people are being accused of crimes just because of the DNA, but they haven't substantiated where those people have been. So I would encourage you to be skeptical about anything until you can put all the pieces together to prove it. And that is a major ethical point, that don't believe anything. Don't even believe the shaky leaves or the hints until you can really substantiate it with proof. And that is the most important part of genealogy, if I could get across to anybody. There's a lot of people that believe we're related to Thomas Nelson Jr., who signed the Declaration of Independence. We are not. Our Thomas Nelson Jr. was the guy who came from Scotland, born in the same year, but he lived across the border in Pennsylvania. Not the same guy, people.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to prove it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So thank you so much, Angela. What a blessing it was to be able to sit and have this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored. Thank you.
Yeah, truly a blessing. And I want to thank all of our viewers for coming to this episode of Sagionic 1027. And until our next episode and our next guest, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon me always. Blessings. Bye.